Hey everybody, it's Jackie, and in today's lecture we are continuing chapter 22, focusing on body art and feminist art practices. To summarize the last lecture, we were looking at conceptual art during the 1960s, which I have broken into different categories here, ranging from artists interested in language, such as Joseph Kosuth, to early video artists like Nam June Paik and Bruce Nauman. Now, these categorizations may help you keep track of the varying themes among the conceptual artists, but please note that there were overlaps in many cases. As we discussed in the previous lecture, the conceptual artists had a natural affinity towards performance because these art events often freed artists from producing a physical output. One form of performance, body art, used the physical body of the artist themselves as its site. As we will see today, these works often included a strong sense of intimacy between the viewer and the performer. Remember that the late 1960s saw the beginning of the women's movement, which exposed the cultural, political, and economic consequences of biology. Women started to use their own bodies to explore and confront these ideas within the culture at large, and Marina Abramović, Carolee Schneemann, Hannah Wilke, among others, are a few examples of artists using their bodies as their medium to grapple with the changing societal norms. To begin our analysis of body art, we will first look at the work of a collaborative pair. Marina Abramović and Ulay were romantic partners and artistic collaborators for 12 years. This couple was among the first to use their bodies as a means for artistic exploration. In their work About Similarity, shown here, both were present on stage as Ulay sewed his mouth shut with a single piece of string. Then Abramović took questions from the audience and answered on his behalf since he was unable to do so himself. In this work, titled Rest Energy from 1980, the couple stand facing each other, dressed almost identically. Abramović pulls the handle of an archery bow. Both wore microphones to magnify the sound of their beating hearts. From these performances, you can see that the way they used their bodies varied, as did the level of viewer participation, though often there was some level of discomfort involved from the audience. Let's take a look at a 2010 performance by Abramović, who continued to be very active after her partnership with Ulay had dissolved. So, as you saw in this work, Abramovich was seated inside the main lobby of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City all day, every day, for several months as viewers waited in line to sit across from her. Now, this performance took great endurance and physical strength from Abramovich, who took no breaks for sometimes 8 or 10 hours at a time. Perhaps equally provocative are the works of body artist Carolee Schneemann. Here we are looking at a photograph documenting one of her renditions of Meat Joy, a piece that offers viewers a hedonistic snapshot of the liberatory spirit of the 1960s. Yet her most famous work is Interior Scroll, shown here. By the 1970s, Schneemann's performance works were at the intersection of culture, the female body, and the combined meaning of both. Interior Scroll was an exceptionally haunting performance that involved Schneemann slowly removing a scroll from her vagina, which she read as the text became available. The text itself was about a confrontation with a male filmmaker. Describing this work, Schneemann stated, "I thought of a vagina in many ways, physically, conceptually, as a sculptural form, an architectural referent, the source of sacred knowledge, ecstasy, birth, passage, transformation." Here is the full text from the scroll. "I met a happy man, a structuralist filmmaker, but don't call me that. It's something else I do," he said. "We are fond of you. You are charming, but don't ask us. To look at your films, we cannot. There are certain films we cannot look at. The personal clutter, the persistence of feelings, the hand-touch sensibility, the diaristic indulgence, the painterly mess, the dense gestalt." He said, "You can do as I do, take one clear process, follow its strictest implications intellectually, establish a system of permutations, establish their visual set. My work has no meaning beyond the logic of its systems. I have done away with emotion, intuition, inspiration, those aggrandized habits which set artists apart from ordinary people, those unclear tendencies which are inflicted upon viewers." He said, "We can be friends equally, though we are not artists equally." I said, "We cannot be friends equally, and we cannot be artists equally." And here is another closer look of Schneemann during the performance of this piece. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate the physicality and intimacy involved in this particular work. Similar to Schneemann, Hannah Wilke also focused on the strengths and challenges of being a female artist. SOS, Starification Object Series, was a work in which she marked her body with signs of distress. The artist was photographed topless, but there were pieces of chewing gum attached to her body that were meant to disrupt the sensuality of the imagery. Cuban-born artist Ana Mendieta used her body often in her work as well. For the Artist Fetish series, she created a mummy-shaped mound surrounded by a shallow ditch, as if recreating an ancient burial ritual. As an aside, Mendieta was married to the minimalist sculptor Carl Andre, but she died tragically at the age of 36 after she fell, jumped, or was pushed out the window of the couple's 34th floor apartment. The details of the incident are not known, but the couple was arguing and drunk at the time of Mendieta's death, according to some sources. This image may seem rather dull at first pass, but artist Vito Acconci was crouching under the raised floor at the end of this room. In his infamous work titled Seedbed from 1972, Acconci spent hours masturbating beneath a gallery-wide ramp with a loudspeaker playing the sounds as he did so. Here is a more graphic image as proof of this perverse performance piece. Needless to say, Acconci made himself vulnerable to audiences during this performance, and he also ran the risk of alienating viewers. This work combines the element of risk in the artwork in a very real way. On the other hand, his work Instant House from 1980 is far more political in nature. The pieces of the house are flat on the ground, but when a viewer steps inside the house and sits on the swing, the whole structure comes to life. Inside the house, the viewer is surrounded by American flags, while on the outside, viewers see Soviet flags with the iconic hammer and sickle. The juxtaposition of this imagery was intended as a commentary about the United States' involvement in the Cold War. If you felt shocked or disgusted about any of the works we have viewed already today, you may also feel strongly about Chris Burden's piece, Shoot. In 1971, Burden became very well known when he asked for a friend to shoot him in the arm during a performance, stating, "In this instant, I was a sculpture." In this still, we see the aftermath of the performance. Whereas in this image, we can see more clearly how this work was executed. Had his friend missed his arm, there could have been a much different outcome for Burden. Later, he stopped making these sorts of violent performances and instead made installations such as All the Submarines of the United States of America from 1987. This work contains 625 miniature models which represent the actual submarines that were used by the United States. The tiny cardboard ships are harmless, but at the same time, they help illustrate the prevalence of these ships. London-based artists Gilbert and George were far less violent, though still provocative. This collaborative pair would transform themselves into living sculpture. Many of their works were humorous, such as the Singing Sculpture from 1971, in which their faces and hands were covered with metallic paint. The two men wore proper English clothing, moving their mouths as though they were wind-up dolls. Second-generation conceptual artist Laurie Anderson was known for her talking songs. She was also married to the late singer Lou Reed. United States Part 2 from 1980 was a 4-part epic that covered big themes such as transportation, politics, sociopsychology, and money. Let's listen in on another one of Anderson's works to have a sense of her unique performance style. Okay, returning to today's lecture, we're going to look at Rebecca Horn, a German performance artist who explored the limits of the human body with props like large feather costumes or gloves with extremely elongated fingers. The feathered prison fan from 1978 here appeared in the artist's first feature-length film, which translates to The Gigolo. It was set in a ballet studio, and the film was both sensuous and erotic, with influences ranging from the surrealist Max Ernst as well as the sculptor Konstantin Brancusi.